Hello everyone and welcome to our episode for the Midwest Spook-kast. Today's episode is focusing on Kayla's missing aunt, Pamela Dunn. In the studio today we've got Mr. Alex Stengel, Kayla, and we got myself, Mariah, and Johnny is editing this. So
it's sad, Johnny can't travel for this one.
No, if he could travel to go find Pam, that'd be cool.
Johnny, you're now our special investigator.
Yes. All right, so being the resident expert on the topic of Pamela Dunn, I'm going to pass it over to Kayla.
Thank you, Mariah. So you called me the resident expert on this, which is interesting. So yes, I am Pamela Dunn's niece. My grandfather was a very busy man back in the day, and I have quite a few many aunts and one uncle. And so I would be technically Pam's half-niece, but regardless, my family was all really, really close, and it didn't matter half or not. They all were full to each other. So being able to do this story is really important to me because, you know, listening to my aunt talking, you guys are going to listen to my Aunt Debbie and I interview later in this podcast. And the one thing that is a common theme that I heard growing up was how much they all looked alike, how much they all acted alike, how they all were kind of rebellious at times. So it's obvious that if Pam were here today, she would be just as amazing of an aunt as all my other aunts are. So I really want to take some time to share her story because it's sad how long she has been gone that we have no answers. So the one important thing is we're constantly getting her message out there, having people hear what's going on, because it's apparent that the more we talk about it, the more things happen, because it was back in 2017 that something did happen and really took off in 2020 because people kept talking. So this might seem kind of redundant to some people, but again, it's one of those things. She went missing 21 years ago. If we keep talking about it, the more answers we're going to get.
Education about a situation is the most important tool.
Mm-hmm. You know, when you said, all I could think was education connection.
Oh my God.
You gotta have a little humor sometimes with this. Pam would appreciate it. It sounds like she's a very humorous person. So I'm kind of curious, when you hear the word kidnapping, what do you think of?
Because it starts with the word kid, I always think of a child, but I know it happens to all ages. It's not just child, but I think of a child being like I think of all those crime scenes or crime shows that you watch on TV. Like I saw one the other day where like a kid had popped out the light on the back bumper and like put her hand through and was like waving to traffic, like, "Hey, I'm stuck in the trunk," you know.
Oh no!
So, like that's what I think of because that's what media has made it seem like.
Right.
Yeah, like you said, like kid. Like I think of like the white van that says free candy on it, and the kid walks over and they grab him and drive off. Or
what if there truly is a van out there though that's giving free candy and no kid will come to it because of the stigma?
That's a bad business venture because all the kids are raised to not go buy that.
Future business model 101, don't do it.
Giving out free candy to children. I've heard of like teenagers being taken away and stuff like that. So it can happen to anyone, anywhere, really. Right. It's, there's not one way it happens.
Right.
Yeah. And you mentioned teenagers, and it made me think of the one we just had in our area last May, where she was meeting up with someone she met on social media, and then they took her. So, yeah, like social media has a lot to do with it nowadays, too.
Definitely. And it's interesting you both bring up kids, because the highest statistic of missing or endangered individuals is children. And that's looking at, and the downfall is with the different statistics. I'm going to discuss that a little bit. There's really no break between kidnapping and missing people. They're all kind of grouped together. So when we think of kids missing children, often can be because of a parental dispute or other things going on. So sometimes they're not truly missing. They're with one of their parents. It's just unfortunate alienation between the parents. But according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it is defined as an act or instance or the crime of seizing, confining, inveiling, abducting, or carrying away a person by force or fraud, often with a demand for ransom or in furtherance of another crime. So when we talk about the case of Pam, it wasn't for ransom. Unfortunately, there never was a ransom asked for, but it is a furtherance of another crime, which was stalking. So often when we think of kidnapping, the first thing that comes to mind is one of our favorite TV shows, which talks about a missing individual with a sensational topic. The one reason I wanted to focus on Pam on this was give her some of her humanity back, because often when we listen to those, it's all about the person being a victim. It's never about, oh, these were the things they did throughout their life. They're a victim. Mm-hmm. We take away that humanity and we no longer, the goal isn't to find them, it's just to listen to their story. And that's the sad part in all of that is a lot of times when we sensationalize something, we don't give it the importance that it needs or really look for what the true mission of this story is. So when we think of these events, we again often forget about the lives lived by the victim, their family left behind, as well as the legacy they helped create. We often sensationalize them and only think of them as a victim when they are so much more than what happened to them. I look at like the case of my Aunt Pam and all of the different people she impacted. I mean, she impacted me and I probably did meet her at some point. I was 5 years old when she went missing. I don't recall anything about her, but hearing her stories impacted me. I constantly had people messaging me after we posted on the Facebook page, different people's stories about how they had so much fun with her, how much they loved her. And it was never about the kidnapping, it was about her story. And it was amazing hearing her story versus, well, Dave did this. And it's like, well, yes, Dave did do this, but what about her story? What did she all do for people? What was important about her to other people? Especially so because she did have 2 daughters. And one of her children did pass away, and she has multiple grandchildren and great-grandchildren she never got the chance to meet that would probably rather have her story be told than just her being a victim.
Humanize her a bit, rather than being a statistic.
Right. And that's just it. The goal is never just to make another statistic because somebody out there probably knows something. So according to a study released by the Department of Justice in 2022, over 600,000 go missing each year. With these FBI statistics, 46,057 people were reported involuntarily missing. Although this consists of kidnapped individuals, it also consists of other types of missing individuals, as the FBI nor any department tracks kidnapping cases. When I was reading this, I found it interesting. Why would they not want to track this separately? Because, granted, missing people is a huge category. Because it can be people who voluntarily go missing because they don't want to be found.
Yeah, they just wander off into the woods or, go live in the mountains and just be a trapper.
Right. Or I was even thinking of like an elderly person with dementia that walks out their front door and gets lost. Like that's involuntary, but that's not kidnapping. That is a missing person, but that's not kidnapping.
Right. Well, it's even more interesting because and you guys will hear this more in the talk with Debbie, my other aunt, where with Dave, he's had 2 wives, both of them went missing, and then Pam went missing.
Do you want to explain who Dave is? Because you've mentioned his name a couple times.
So the Dave that I'm referencing to, David Osmondson, is the individual who is sitting in the state penitentiary for kidnapping and stalking of Pamela Dunn. He is in there for life currently. The downfall is with him only being in there for kidnapping and stalking is that he hasn't received the true justice he deserves. And because no one has come forward to say where she's at, he's not obliged to say where she is because, granted, he's stuck there for life regardless. He ain't gonna say anything because he doesn't want to receive further punishment. And for him, it's another form of control. And I'm going to kind of talk more about Dave later on, too, because they were in a relationship for 2 years together in an extremely abusive relationship. And Debbie kind of explains this a little bit more, too, in the interview where the prior wife to meeting Pam, Dave had also abused her, and she voluntarily went missing because he threatened to kill her. And when he ended up in jail, she came out. So the downfall is, it's highly likely, I have no doubt in my mind that Dave did this to her because he is the last person that's seen her. But the sad part is this isn't the first time this has happened with Dave, and we'll kind of talk about that some more too. So, kind of going back to my statistics. Currently, 132 people are considered missing in the state of South Dakota, where the highest number consists of children. I'm kind of curious, what do you guys think is the highest number of missing people in that category, outside of children?
Highest number of people missing
You mean
in
like
South Dakota?
teenagers, adults, elder, like is that what you mean? Or
Kind of. So what group of, I should say what ethnic group?
Natives.
Group? Probably Native.
Indigenous.
Yeah, Native American.
It's actually really sad. There's a lot of videos out there right now about the missing and endangered Native Americans of South Dakota and North Dakota, and how often there isn't much emphasis put on their kidnappings. And that's even more traumatizing, realizing that we have this large population of individuals here that their story isn't heard. Mm-hmm. And there's no really emphasis on trying to bring them back home. It's kind of like, oh, well, they went missing. But yeah, they're still a person.
Right.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really interesting that being in the state that we are almost 1 million people, but we're one of the least populated, our highest number of missing people is Native people.
So. And I'm sure, like, other places in the United States, they think that because they're a minority group in their state, but here in South Dakota, they're actually a majority group here.
Right.
So it's even more statistically important to the fact that they are the biggest ethnic group in South Dakota because they are a majority group here in South Dakota rather than a minority.
Right. And it's sad because they have such a rich history, and we have so many groups here, too. It's not just one group of people. We got the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota. We got the Sioux, we got the Cheyenne. We got so many different groups of people that live here, and they're treated as one when the reality is they all have their unique story, but their people, especially their women, are being found missing all the time. Yeah. And these are stories that really need an emphasis too, and maybe in the future that's some that we'll focus on too. But tragically with some of these cases, they do hit home, and that's the reality. Oftentimes when we listen to different podcasts is we don't think that, it could happen to you. Well, the reality is it can hit you or it can hit at home. For this story, I'll be sharing in the case of my aunt Pamela Dunn of Watertown, South Dakota. So, on the lucky day of October 4th, so she was a spooky baby. She was born on October 4th of 1963. She was born to Loretta Dunn in Watertown, South Dakota, and was given the last name of her husband, Marvin. So, this might be a little confusing. So, Marvin is not Pam's biological father. Her biological father would be my grandfather. He was not on the birth certificate, though. With losing Pam so young, not much is known about her childhood. I even did some investigating on Ancestry.com, trying to find any documents on her. So with her going missing young, she really didn't have a chance to tell her daughter Stacy, who was still alive, much about her story. She couldn't tell my Aunt Debbie much about her story. Granted, her mom was alive for many, many years.
How old was your aunt when she went missing?
I might have to do a little bit of digging on that. I believe she was in her, so she went missing 21 years ago, and she just turned 60, so she would have been
49.
Yeah, she would have been 40s. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So, granted, that might not seem young to some people, but it's still not enough time to get her story out there.
Right.
And the downfall is no one really recorded any of that, which really brings up the importance of, telling people your story before you're gone.
Right.
Even if you don't think it's important to someone else, it's important.
Right. Well, and, it's hard to think of to maybe do that because you don't know that the last time you see someone might have been the last time you saw them.
Right.
So it's, you don't always think about doing something like that where you get your story put out there,
right,
ahead of time.
Right. And that's so very true because we never think of it happening to us. We're always, it's going to happen to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. Never me.
And when you're 39, 40 years old like she was, you're like, I have so much life left.
Yeah.
Our national, our average lifespan is close to 85, right? Something like that.
Yeah, roughly.
So she was probably thinking, I got another 40 some years to tell my story,
Right.
Yeah, you just don't think that at a young age, as 39, 40 years old, you need to be telling people your story because something like that is going to happen.
Right. And that's just it, too. And it's, granted, with it being 21 years ago, maybe some was known, but again, with time, we lose some of those stories, too.
Yeah, you forget it, or you forget details and remember things wrong, not intentionally, but we do. Our memory isn't perfect. No,
and that's just it, too. And it's too bad she's not here to share her story. We should have never had to share her story for her.
Right.
So at the age of 17, Pamela introduced her daughter, Jennifer. In 1979 and in 1981, her daughter, Stacy. Although a young mother, Pam's daughter, Stacy, described her as one of the strongest, most beautiful, loving, caring, funniest, and someone you could talk to about everything, and she was there no matter what for family. There was nothing more than always being there for her family, especially for her grandbabies. And then later, her granddaughter, Kinsey, also stated to me, I wish people knew how great of a person she was. These words encompass what a truly amazing woman, mother, and grandmother Pam is. And I say is because no one will ever take away that from her. It's not a was, it's an is. Pam, although a strong woman, lost her daughter Jennifer shortly after she turned 5 in an elevator accident in Watertown. And that's even really heartbreaking. I did some research on Jennifer, and there's not much known about Jennifer either. With this heartbreaking event, Pam continued to raise her daughter Stacy with a strong-willed passion where empowering her family was most important to her. A common theme is apparent when talking to anyone about Pam, and that is the strong-natured woman who had more passion for her family than one could begin to describe, but especially so for her residence at Jenkins. So when I was writing that out, I found it kind of funny. A lot of my family has worked in nursing homes, either CNAs or nurses, so it's interesting because they always talk about how much they love their residents, and so did Pam too. And there's, even to this day, there is a painting up that's in memory of Pam because of how much she cared about her residents. And it was especially hard on her residents when she went missing.
Aww. She made such an impact. I love it.
Right.
You even worked in a nursing home for a few years.
I did.
It really must run in the family.
It did. I don't plan to go back, though, unfortunately. I hurt myself enough working in that industry. So having started as a housekeeper and later moving up to a CNA, or certified nursing assistant, Pam put her heart and soul into every part of her work. One story that brings a smile to one's face is listening to Mackenzie, her granddaughters, discuss a memory of her grandmother where she reminisces, "I remember she took me with her once when she took one of the residents to the zoo, and he had an amazing time. His facial expressions will forever stick with me. He was the happiest man alive. Shoot, my mom couldn't even discipline me. When she did, my grandmother would take me to Walmart and buy me toys." So I thought that was really funny because they were all really, really close. And even being a young mother, too, for Stacy, having Pam there was so important because they both understood each other. And the more I thought about it, I thought, especially with the residents, you don't hear of that happening very much anymore, where CNAs take residents out and about anymore. They're kind of stuck there. Mm-hmm. And that just really shows how much she cared about her residents. Mm-hmm. And just how much they need that kind of stuff, too.
Yeah. Right.
I was thinking that is such a grandmother thing to do. Like, you get in trouble with your mom, and then you go to grandma, and grandma takes you to Walmart.
You go to grandma or grandpa because they're the ones that are going to let you get away with it.
Yeah.
Right, and then they yell at your parents.
I think of your son with his grandparents, and I'm like, that's totally something that his grandparents would do.
Oh, gosh. If I yell at my son, they yell at me, and then they go buy him something.
Exactly. Like, that's a grandparent's job. I see it with my own parents, with my nieces. If my older sister gets after the girls, then mom and dad are like, "Oh, come here, let's go do something fun." And I'm like, you would have yelled at me for the same thing. But since they're your grandkids,
they do no wrong.
They're perfect angels.
But I mean, we'll probably do that as grandparents someday too. Not gonna lie.
I don't plan to have kids, so I won't have grandkids.
Okay, well, you'll do it to other people's grandkids.
I'll do it to your grandkids.
Perfect. You'll show up and be like, "It's me, Great Aunt Mariah," to save the day. So hearing this story brings tears to my eyes reading this, as the love and respect Kenzie has for her grandmother is immeasurable. And the sad part is, Kenzie was telling me that, and I can't remember the exact number of grandchildren she has, not many of them got to know her. The only one that really got to know her was Kenzie. And I sit there and think about how close I was with my grandma Rosemary and all the years I got to spend with her, and I miss her every day. But then I look back and go, wow, I really got a long time with her compared to what others did. My poor cousins never got to know her as a person, and how traumatizing that would be. But Stacy, so her daughter, would further emphasize Pam's unique character by stating another thing she loves the most besides her family was her job at Jenkins. That was pretty much her second family. She loved her job. She loved taking care of the residents, and she loved taking care of them and seeing their smiles. She gained a really strong bond or relationship with them. Some she would even take out for walks outside and take them on outings. So again, just kind of emphasizing what Mackenzie said about taking them on different outings and whatnot. And the reality is, when you are a CNA, you do become their family. They often don't have many people who visit, so you become their family. And the love between you and that resident is unbreakable. So hearing these stories, it's easy to crack a smile as you can feel the warmth and love that Pam gave to everyone around her, as it's emphasized in the words of her family to this day. And nothing will ever take that away. 21 years ago, all she did with her residents, it still stands strong to this day. Granted, most of her residents are probably gone, if not all of them. But the sad part is they never got to say goodbye to her. How traumatizing that would be to have one of your favorite caretakers stop showing up and having no answers on it.
Mm-hmm. Especially if it's someone who's struggling with, like, dementia.
I was just thinking something like, if they have mental issues and they got into that system of they actually do remember this person, and all of a sudden they're not there anymore.
Right. And that's even the harder part, because with the regression with Alzheimer's and dementia, if that does happen, it's even harder for them because every day is going to be a struggle with that. And they might become aggressive because they don't understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. And it's understandable. I mean, if you can't remember from day in and day out, what are you going to do? If some random stranger shows up and the one person you do remember is not there, you're going to think that they're there to hurt you. Mm-hmm. So later in life, Pam would meet her half-siblings Debbie, Kim, Katie, and Kenny. Although particularly close with Debbie, both would go on to enjoy their youthful years, enjoying outings together and sharing in the joys of meeting new men. So there is a documentary out, and I have to laugh about this. Debbie jokes about this all the time, all the trouble they used to get into with boys, because when you're young, you love to meet the boys. I mean, granted, I've been with my husband 10 years, but I don't know, I just look back when I was younger. It was just fun talking to random guys, and I don't know.
But that's not something I ever did with my sisters. Like, I'm so impressed that these two sisters did it together.
Right?
Because that was always something, like, you and I did growing
Yes.
up. And sometimes we'd bring Alex in on it, and Alex would be like, I don't want to hear about these boys.
like, I don't need to hear this.
But, like, or Johnny would do the same, you know.
Right.
But, like, my sisters were not ones that we went and sought out boys. So that just shows how close Pam and Debbie were, was the fact that they felt comfortable enough to talk about boys with each other. And
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think about it that way too. I only have a brother. I don't think I'd want to go hit on the boys with my brother.
Zach would be all in it. He would love it.
He would. I mean, that is totally Zach's go-to thing. But you do have a good point. That is amazing. And the funny thing is that Debbie talks about this in the interview, is how they didn't even know they were sisters at first. So
They felt more like best friends then.
they were soul sisters in a way, because when they first met, it was an instant connection.
Oh.
And then when later finding out they were sisters, it made complete sense. But you hear a lot of stories about that where people who don't realize they're siblings get really, really attached as best friends, and then later find out they're siblings, and it's like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense now.
Right.
It probably helps that they weren't, like, living in the same house, too. You know, like, that's one thing with siblings. When you grow up, you're in the same house.
You always see them.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, like, if they weren't in the same house, like, that also kind of helps you get that alone time, so that when they come back, they do have that strong connection. So that probably helps, too.
Right. I just thought it was so amazing that they never knew each other, and all of a sudden they met and became friends. And it's like, how does that happen? It's just, it just blew my mind, and I was listening to Debbie talk about that. But in the 1990s were the lit years.
That was when we were all born.
Heck yeah.
1990s.
Heck yeah. Pam would go on a date with David Osmundson. Issues began to rise as many family members were afraid of how David would treat Pam, as often he would verbally and physically abuse her. Stacy described David as treating Pam like a piece of property where he had no respect for her family or friends. One such incident of concern, which was highlighted in Season 4, Episode 9 of Stalked, Someone's Watching, episode titled Without a Trace, shows Pam actively taking care of residents, and confusingly, David showed up at her place of work and chased her into a bathroom where she locked herself in it. And from there, cops were called in. At one point, David proposed to Pam, which she accepted as she felt she couldn't get any better due to his degrading nature on her. And the sad part is, for anyone that knows, my aunts, especially Debbie, they're very strong-willed women, and they're ones that they love life. They're very positive about things. So I can only imagine Pam was the same way, and taking that away from her, I want to go and find David and punch him in the worst way.
And, speaking from personal experience of being in that kind of bad, toxic relationship, like, when that person really gets their grip on you, you really don't feel like you're worth anything.
Right.
So it is sad how much power one person can hold over another just because you think you love that person.
Right. Well, the sad part is a lot of times it's the control from their own low self-esteem.
Yep.
That the only way to make themselves feel better is to make you feel worse.
Yes.
Which he did. Although we as outsiders may not agree with David, those in abusive relationships, like you said, Mariah, can often relate to the beatdown of their self-worth. The once strong-willed woman was diminished by this man's destruction. Pam found the strength to walk away and later started seeing a new man.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Go off, queen. Pam found the strength to walk away, and after meeting this new man, David would still frequently call, threaten Pam, and leave horrifying voice messages. If you're ever curious there's actually recordings on this episode of Pam's where David would threaten her, and it was scary. Myself, I felt diminished listening to it, and he's so cruel.
Jeez.
And the sad part is that there was a maximum of, I can't remember if it was the maximum, but they did state on one day she had 17 voicemails from him. So that doesn't show how many missed calls there is, but how many voicemails there is.
Oh my gosh.
Right. And the sad part is he was a trucker, so he was he was on the road, but he had people stalking her and telling him at all times where she was. One such incident, David left a message stating, "Boy, Pam, there are some bad consequences. I hate to say it." And in it, I didn't put the names he called her, just because, for sake of those listening, I don't think, if there is a younger audience listening, they don't want to hear the degrading names that she was called. We want to keep this in a light where Pam is a strong-willed woman. We don't want to hear David's language use.
At a certain point, it just becomes numb and not necessary. Yeah, anyone who's old enough to know what he would have said, you know, you could probably imagine it.
Right. Agreed 100% on that. And you listen to it and you just want to, I'll put it lightly, I want to punch him. I mean, there's many other things I'd much rather do, but I'll keep this PG-13.
At this point, did she get the police involved?
They were involved.
Okay.
She had a protection order in place and he laughed at it. So he would show up at her place, he would call and threaten her, and when police would get involved, he didn't care. Now, on December 10th, Pam did not arrive for her job at Jenkins, and the ironic part with this is Pam didn't miss work. Even when she was sick, she would go to work, if she was able to.
Dedication.
Right? Girl, I need those vibes. Coworkers brought up concerns as this was not like Pam at all. She was known to be a reliable individual, but red flags were apparent as many had witnessed David's abuse. Police were contacted, and when arriving at the scene, Christmas lights were on and Pam's car keys and coat remained. Being that it is December, it can be unbearably cold, so not having her coat is immensely concerning. Although police reported no signs of a struggle, Pam is unable to be located. This is the part that's interesting. There was no signs of break-in. There was only one other person that still had a key to her apartment building. And that would have been David.
Oh my gosh, so all the incriminating evidence leads directly to him.
Right. When further investigating, it was found that David had left 17 threatening voicemails on Pam's phone before her disappearance. David also self-presented to the police when it was released that Pam was missing. For anyone listening, this most likely is a tactic where he believed if he expressed his innocence right away, the police wouldn't go after him. It was later found out that David had been at Pam's apartment on the 9th, so the day before she went missing, and most likely was the last person to see her, other than her mother who dropped her off at her apartment. So to kind of explain off that, the reason David was there, Stacy had actually talked to Pam that night, and she explained that he came to pick up a few of his last items there. So, she didn't want him there, the protection order wasn't in place, but Pam was one of those that she thought she was strong enough to handle it. And the reality is, oftentimes when we get to this point, there's nothing that you can do to probably stop someone like that, because he is so obsessed.
Was he still, like, calling her at this point? Like, did she ever change her phone number?
No.
I was going to say, that would be something that I would maybe consider doing, is changing your phone number so they can't get a hold of you. But I guess if he's at that level of obsession, he probably would figure it out somehow.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
But this also was the 90s. So changing your phone number probably wasn't as simple as it is now.
Right.
Showing up to your cellular provider and being like, hey, I got someone stalking me, so I need to change my number. And they do it. Like, it probably was more of a process back in the 90s.
That's probably true, yeah. I didn't think about it like that.
Right.
Yeah, I was thinking about it like with today, it's, you know, if you're getting harassed and it's really to that point and blocking their number doesn't do anything because they have your number, you change yours.
Right. But, and I mean, great, and that's kind of the nice thing, it is a lot easier this day and age too, and the reality is, and maybe that's something she did consider too, but the downfall
or maybe didn't consider, possibly.
True. And that's where a lot of times we think we're strong enough that we can handle it by ourselves, and the reality is, if you're in a domestic violence situation, you don't have to do it by yourself. There is no reason that you should feel alone in that situation, because again, there's somebody out there that does understand, and there's people out there that want to help, because no one deserves to be in a situation like that. But her daughter Stacy had reached out by phone, but most likely was the last person to talk to her other than David. One thing not found at the apartment was the diamond engagement ring, which was later given to police by Chris Osmundson, the ex-wife of David's brother, as David had dropped the ring off prior to the sentencing in 2004. So to kind of make this make sense, so David was originally put in jail for kidnapping, but it was only for, I think, 20 months. It was either 20 or 40 months. I can't remember exactly what it was. And shortly before the full sentencing, he had provided, I believe it was both a comb and the diamond engagement ring to his now ex-sister-in-law. And she provided it to police. So to them, that's a big enough sign that he did kidnap her, because before they didn't have the evidence that it was him. But because the engagement ring was missing and she did have it with her, that's a sign that he was the last person with her. But
all evidence points to David.
Right. And that's just that there was no other incriminating person in her life that would have done this. And many people, one of his own prison cellmates, which Debbie talks about too, even admitted that he told his inmate that the police are dumb if they think he used the same vehicle. Well, because he has 2 work vehicles and his own personal vehicle. He's like, they'd be dumb to think I used one of my work vehicles to dispose of her. God. And he flat out told another one that we will never know where she is. So he's admitted his guilt. But the sad thing is, when he had control over Pam, when she's gone, he no longer has that control. So who can he control instead?
Right.
That's really setting up a lot of red flags on what in the heck is going on here.
Because, yeah, to me, when you said that he told the inmate that he disposed of her, to me that sounds like he killed her and left her body somewhere, as opposed to she's missing. But, of course, since there's no body, there's nothing to confirm, I guess, so.
Right.
Yeah,
that's the sad part, is there are multiple hypotheses out there as to what has happened to her. I mean, and I'll kind of talk about the one here in a little bit, too, but it's, with it being 21 years, it's going to be hard to find anything other than bones.
Thankfully, with today's technology, if they do find something, they can still extract DNA and do a confirm.
Dental records, stuff like that.
Yeah, like they'll if it happens, they'll still be able to positively ID her thanks to today's technology.
Definitely, and that's where we're at next. Is if anything is found, if we can link it to her, we can put her to rest where she belongs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Although David was not originally sentenced to his current life sentence, this finding put him behind bars for the remainder of his life. Many concerns have been brought up along the way, though, such as the number of vehicles David used the day of the kidnapping and the day before, the numerous lies he told investigators, and a comment he made to a fellow inmate. Where she is, she won't be found anytime soon. To this day, David remains in the South Dakota State Penitentiary. David refuses to admit where Pam is located, and the hope is that one day he may finally confess. The reality is for us is that he probably never will.
How old is he?
He is in his 70s.
70s? Oh, geez. So, yeah, even if he was going to... Yeah, he's there till for the rest of his life. He could be alive there for another decade, potentially. Easily.
Right.
Jeez.
And that's just it, he's not receiving the punishment. Granted, would there be much of a difference in punishment between kidnapping and murder? Because I don't believe I'm not sure if death penalty exists in South Dakota. But even if it does, I can't imagine they would sentence him to that. But it would still be reassuring to know that he has that conviction now. To this day, many hypotheses have been given to where Pam may be found around Watertown and numerous other locations. Most recently, in 2017, law enforcement received a tip that David may have disposed Pam's remains in a well. And this is outside of Clear Lake, if I recall correctly. The initial surface-level investigation located hair. The hair, though, through DNA testing, was confirmed as human, and with this, a full-scale investigation took place in 2020. So this was the really alarming part when my family first heard that the hair was linked and confirmed to be human. It was almost like a reassurance that maybe we're closer. And when in 2020 they dug up the well completely, nothing was found. It was the biggest heartbreak. Because it's like we're led to believe this could be something, and now it's like this is nothing now. Now where could she be? But unfortunately, no remains were found, and to this day, Pam is still classified as a missing person. So many of my family simply want answers. Being able to take her home and give her a proper resting place is essential. Listening to the memories growing up from my Aunt Debbie, and now listening to even more memories from Kenzie and Stacy, makes me wish I would have known this wonderful woman more. With her having disappeared when I was 5, I never got to know Pam, but can only listen to the memories. If anyone has answers, please step forward and let law enforcement know. No one wishes for this to happen to their family member, but having answers can help find some form of closure and give David the conviction he deserves. If you or someone you know has answers, please reach out to the Cottington County Sheriff's Department. 21 years have passed, and it's time for her to come home. And the sad thing is, like Debbie and I talked a lot, is that whenever it comes to a case like this, a lot of times there is someone who's seen something, and they're scared to say something. Mm-hmm. And the reality, or even they're scared that they might get convicted for something because they're like, well, I witnessed it. Mm-hmm. That makes me guilty. And it's like, no, in that case, you are a victim.
Right.
You did not convict the crime. Mm-hmm. You simply were a witness. Mm-hmm. And to this day, if you're fearful of David, he is where he belongs. Mm-hmm. and he cannot harm you. And the reality is even little bits help, because little bits a long time lead to actually a discovery. And we're seeing that to this day, where long-term missing people off small clues are found and they're put to rest.
Yeah. And if you're scared for like protection or something after admitting something, if you talk to your local police department, they will do what they can to provide protection for you. You know, like there's witness protection programs and such that they can get you in if you are really concerned about like someone's family coming after you for coming forward.
Right. And not only that, there is a page on Facebook called In Memory of Pam Dunn, which is hosted by my Aunt Debbie. If you're one that is scared of telling and wanting to remain anonymous, police stations will keep you anonymous. We'll keep you anonymous if that helps. Because the reality is we don't want you getting harmed either. But again, your protection is important, but also bringing our aunt home is important. We can keep you anonymous, whatever it has to be, as long as we can get those answers. So to kind of finish this off next, I'm going to finish this podcast off with the recording between myself and Debbie. I thought it was kind of important to end off with that, as I kind of think it gives that more of a connection with her, because again, Debbie knew her really well. And it's interesting how Debbie describes her. There's so much emotion and love in it. And I think you all will really enjoy it. But take care, y'all, and stay spooky and enjoy the interview. Hello, this is Kayla with the Midwest Spook-kast. So I am here with my aunt, Deb Toth.
Toth.
Oh, I'm sorry, I totally butchered that. But, so I have her with me today, as she is the half-sister of my other aunt, Pam Dunn, and she had a very good relationship with Pam, so I felt she was a great resource when it comes to these kind of things, has a better understanding of how to answer these questions too, and can kind of fill us in a little bit of her story, some of the experiences she's had with Pam, and hopefully help us kind of relate to some different things with Pam and get to know her better as a person. So, Deb, I got some questions for you.
Well, let her rip.
All right, so my first one for you is, when did you first remember meeting your sister Pam?
First time I met Pam, I was 18, and I moved back to Watertown from Minneapolis because I actually met my biological parent that was dating her mother, and we became really good friends right away and hung out and did so much together, and she was fun.
It's interesting that you two didn't even know that you were sisters.
No.
And you became almost kind of like soul sisters before you knew you were sisters.
She was actually my best friend before I found out we were sisters.
To me, that's amazing, because it's you hear of cases like that where people meet their sibling that they didn't know was their sibling, and it's almost like it was meant to be that friendship, that you find someone that's so much like you. But my next question for you is, what was your relationship with Pam like?
Pam, we did a lot of fun things. We'd hit the try and sneak into the bars and not so much to drink, but just to hang out and have fun and stuff. We'd go out and spend time with, her girls before Jenny passed away, and we did so much. And whenever she needed to get away or, have some time away, she always came to me.
Right.
And she was bubbly, she was so full of life, and
She was a lot like you.
I guess.
No, that's the one thing I talk about earlier in the podcast, how with Pam being my aunt, I don't have the connection to her that many people have with her aunt. I look at like my relationship with Debbie here. We're extremely close. She's like a mom figure to me. My other aunts I'm super close to, so I know if Pam were here, it'd be another situation where I know she'd be just as amazing of an aunt as the wonderful aunts I have. right now, and my heart breaks not getting that opportunity to meet her and hear all these stories about her and what a wonderful person she was. And an adventurous person, too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. She got married a few times and moved down to Arizona, and me and a couple other friends went down to rescue her and brought her back, and she wouldn't settle down. She always was on the wild side.
She knew how to live life exciting, it sounds like.
Oh, yes.
Maybe in some ways that we wish wouldn't have happened for her.
True.
Right. So my next thing is, we know a little bit about Pam. What do you remember about Dave?
When I first met Dave, it was when I was married to my first husband down by Flandreau. And he came down with her, and before she even got in the house, he come walking in, didn't knock, come up and arms wide open like he wanted a big hug, and I backed up. It's just something hit me. Mm-hmm. I just couldn't put my thumb on it, but I just didn't trust him.
Right.
I didn't feel, he just didn't seem right. Mm-hmm. And that's when Pam came in and she said, "Oh, this is my new boyfriend, Dave." Mm-hmm. I instantly did not like him, but I didn't know why. I know now why. It's
interesting you say that. Just from my experience with you, you often are very open to people. And if it was a stranger on the street came running up to you for a hug, you give them a hug, no questions asked.
Oh, yes.
But right away, red flags were flying up about him.
There was, that red flag was so big, it probably could have covered the house.
Oh, no. Ugh. I'm kind of curious, how did he treat her daughters?
Jenny wasn't around when Pam was with Dave. She had Stacy. And Stacy was not treated very well by him. Mm-hmm. And Stacy had a little girl that he told her that he was going to smash her little girl's head against the wall or whatever till it, broke open or whatever. I don't know the exact wordage he used, but he was going to physically hurt her.
Mm-hmm. And that's alarming because at that point Mackenzie was a small child.
Oh, yes.
And that sends up many red flags. And Dave, it doesn't sound like Dave had any children of his own that we know of.
He's got a couple kids.
Oh, he does? Okay.
Yes. But they're all grown, and I don't know if they have any relationship with him or not. I know he's got an ex-wife that disappeared for 4 years. Mm-hmm. But she came back after Dave was gone.
Right. It's too bad that same thing didn't happen for Pam, that once he's gone, she was able to come back.
I've often prayed for something like that. Pam either, went away until he's dead.
Right.
And then she'd come back. But no, I believe that not to be so, because Stacy had a child and it died on Pam's birthday, and I know Pam would not have let Stacy go through that without her.
Right. And the one thing I know from what you've all said about Pam and what Stacy said about Pam, what Mackenzie said about Pam, what everyone said about Pam, especially with her mother. Her mother unfortunately passed away here a couple years ago. I don't think she would have wanted her mother to pass away without knowing where she's at.
Right.
And I think that's a good indicator that she's not hiding herself away on purpose. So that's kind of the depressing side, is we would hope that if that were the case, she would have arrived by now, and it's been 22 years.
21.
Oh, it's been 21.
21. It'll be 22 years in December that she's been gone.
Okay.
Because I posted on her Facebook page. I have a Facebook page in memory of Pamela Dunn. On December 8th, I posted that if her missing, the length of her missing was a person, it was legal age to drink now.
Mm-hmm. That's so sad to think about, because all of these years she's missed, all the grandchildren she never got to meet, all of the nieces and nephews she never got to meet, the
great-grandchildren.
oh yeah, the great-grandchildren now. And hearing all the stories, she would have been a wonderful grandma to all of them. And I hear she just had this vibrant personality about her that she would have been one hell of a grandma.
Oh yes. Oh yes. She loved her daughter, and she loved any kids, and even the elderly she cared about. She just loved people.
It must be a family trait. We're all very much so very much so people.
Oh yes.
And that's, I find it funny. Debbie's daughter, Deneen, had reached out to me on TikTok and was saying that so many of us are so much like Pam, where we're vibrant like she is, we're adventurous like she is, and that we're continuing her legacy almost in a way that even though she's gone, we still, every single one of us, even those of us that haven't met her, we all hold a piece of her with us. But our goal too, of course, is we wish she was here with us.
Right.
And that's the downside, is that hopefully someday we have those answers. And that's why a lot of why we continue this message, even to this day, 21 years later, is no family wants to go without answers. We shouldn't be going without answers. There's got to be someone out there that knows something. And at this point, Dave can't get out and hurt you.
Right.
And that's, of course, too, everyone's safety is important. But again, too, Pam's safety is also important, too. And it's time she comes home.
And if there's somebody out there who knows something and wants to remain anonymous, you can either make a fake Facebook account, go on Pam's page and say, hey, this is what's happened. I want to remain anonymous. So,
Right.
But somebody out there knows something. And if they could only just come forward and give us the closure that we need to allow us to put Pam to rest and have an actual memorial for her. That's what we need.
I cannot agree more with that. And there's so many different missing persons cases here in the United States, and most of them answers are found. And when we go on this long, like Debbie talked about, the 21 years is the same age as someone who was now legally able to drink, and now with changes in law, able to smoke now.
Yeah.
So if her missing years were a person, they would be that old. And it's crazy to think about how long that has been, all the things she's missed. I mean, technology is so different now. I'm curious what she would think of everything. But the next thing I got for you, Debbie, is what would you describe the relationship between Dave and Pam?
Very rocky at times. Their relationship was only about 2 years long total, but it was on and off for that 2 years. He was very controlling, very domineering, very jealous. He didn't want Pam having anything to do with anybody.
Did that include her own child?
If it took attention away from him, yes.
That's incredibly selfish. But I can understand that would have been difficult for her to leave too, because he took a lot of that control away from her.
Yep.
That at one time it seemed like she was a pretty strong person, and still was, but when it comes to domestic violence, that power and that voice is so much in one party that the other party literally has zero. That their power has been completely given to this other person, and that whatever voice they had, they feel like what their feelings are not valid anymore.
Yeah.
And that they have this false sense that those around them don't believe them, or that the person makes them feel like others won't care or understand, when the reality is they do.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So my question for you is, it's been 21 years since Pam's disappearance. What is your hope for her?
I hope before I die that, remains of hers are found. We can, put her in a place where she's near her daughter, Jenny, her mother, so that they're together.
So Loretta is Pam's mom, correct?
Correct.
Is she buried over by Jenny?
Yes.
Okay. And there is a marker for Pam right now, just...
Yes.
Okay.
It's got her name on it and everything, just no dates.
Right.
It's got her birth date, but not...
Mm-hmm. And it's even sadder because, again, there's these two... Her daughter, of course, who passed away when she was 5, and her mother, who... I can't imagine how difficult that is as a mother myself, never having the answers on my child, and then passing away without those answers. How...
Well, she does have them now.
Right. And that's a really good feeling, but it's hopefully...
She didn't have it here on Earth.
Right. And we don't want the rest of the family to go that same way the rest of their life.
Right.
And I think that's always a hope that even her mother has, is that there's answers someday. If there's one thing you could tell Pam, what would it be?
That I miss you and I love you. You were a lot of fun. You missed out on so much in life. We missed out on you.
I'm gonna cry like listening. It's so heartbreaking to hear, because you two were so close. And all these things that you want to tell her, she should be here for you to be able to tell her.
Yeah.
And I truly hope that one day we have those answers, and that with all the different people that have been there in her life, that have seen things, again, being a stranger isn't helpful in the situation, and we can understand the fear aspects of it. And I'll kind of go over that some more here in a little bit. But I have one last question for you. Do you feel someone out there knows what happened to Pam?
Absolutely. There is no crime that is committed without somebody knowing something.
Right.
And whether that person is scared to come forward, or they don't think some information is not big enough, or that they feel that, they don't want to get involved, help us.
Right.
Get in contact with somebody, or like I said, go on her Facebook page and put, what you know. Mm-hmm. Anything is better than nothing.
Agreed. And you brought up how they don't want to get involved. Often the thought is, if you witness something, you're already involved.
Yes.
And the fear sometimes for people, I think, is they don't want to get in trouble. And the honest reality is no one's in trouble if they witness something. Unfortunately, you, in a sense, were a victim too, because you didn't commit that crime. But that story is being hidden. If someone knows something, the fear doesn't have to be there anymore, because Dave Osmussen is in jail, and he will be the rest of his life. And if something more comes forward and we can find more answers, that will even solidify where he's at right now. And he receives a punishment that is deserved upon him. And at this point, the answers aren't going to come from him. He's been adamant on that answers will never come from him.
No.
And that's where we really rely on others. And some people have been really good about trying to help with the well incident that happened here a couple years ago. It sounds like was from a reported case from
Yes. That, and people coming forward and saying, well, Dave was involved in these, cars over in this area, and thinking maybe she was put into a car that got crushed,
Right.
or thrown in, a body of water. It's she's got to be somewhere.
Right.
So.
Right. The reality is, and we see it time and time again with human history, is that bones and body parts don't just disappear. People remain. And the reality is, we want her back, to put her somewhere that she's with her family. Right now, she's not with her family. Being able to reunify her with her family will help bring some form of closure to the family. And my firm belief is that 21 years is well over enough time.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, I think of it this way. Granted, I was 5 years old when she went missing. I'm kind of an old lady right now. Debbie's giving me a look right now. I feel like I'm 90 years old.
Honey, I'm going to be 60 years old in less than a month.
You know what? 60's the new 20.
Hey, I like that.
Well, and I think about it. You were saying you're 26 days apart from Pam, right?
29.
Oh, 29. That's kind of interesting that sisters, your ages are so close together that makes you even closer.
Yeah. Her birthday was, she would have been 60 years old yesterday. Mm-hmm. And, I secretly wished her a happy birthday and kind of remembered some of the things that her and I used to do and all the crazy things she used to do. Oh, my Lord.
God, she sounds like a fun lady.
When we'd go out and we were of age to be drinking, mm-hmm. I would have to stay sober just to babysit her and get her home safe.
Okay, so what you're saying is she knew how to have a good time.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
I was telling Debbie earlier, I find it so interesting. Pam, Debbie, my mom, Katie, and Kenya, they're all, well, Katie, my mom, and Kenny are full siblings, but the rest are half siblings. It's interesting. I was telling you, when they were all younger, they all looked so much alike that it was crazy. And I'm like, how did you all look so much alike? And I was going to say, they just knew how to have that much fun that I guess God had to bless them to look alike. So if they got in trouble out in public, they knew who to tie them to. But I guess the only final thoughts that I have throughout this is, again, there's so many answers we have. Could things have been handled differently? Maybe. But again, kidnappings are such difficult cases to sometimes understand. And with 21 years passing, we've had enough time now. It's time for her to come home. But getting her message out there more is so important for anyone that knows about Pam. Debbie talked about the page in memory of Pam. Go on there and share memories about her. Keep her memory alive. It's so important because the more that we talk about her, the more we humanize her. And remember that she's not a victim, she's a person.
And the more you talk about her to, anybody, mm-hmm. it keeps people still looking.
That's just it. And it's interesting. I know I go to school in Brookings at SDSU, and I've had professors ask if I'm the niece of Pam Dunn, because I'll talk about some of my aunts and my uncle and my different family members, and they kind of connect the dots, and they're like, you're Pam Dunn's niece. And I'm like, yes, I am. And they will talk about what they've learned. It's like, it's amazing how much her story's gotten out there. Mm-hmm. But again, with it being out there that much, we got to continue that. And even if she's found, we can continue that and remember what a wonderful person she was.
And if you've got a smart TV, you can bring up the Investigation Discovery Channel, mm-hmm. go to season 4 and watch the episode. It's called He Laughed at the Protection Order. Mm-hmm. And you can watch it from start to finish.
Right. And I really had to appreciate that. They did a really good job of reenacting some of it. It brings out a lot of feelings watching what Pam went through with mm-hmm. Dave. And granted, you said it was only 2 years that they dated, and he was extremely obsessed with her.
Oh, yes.
And the sad part was, it sounds like when she went missing, she was dating another individual.
Yes.
Okay.
She was dating Rich.
Okay. And I kind of want to clarify, too, some research I was doing when it sounds like Dave was the last person to see her regardless.
Yes.
Okay. So he was in the home December 9th.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's where I was kind of reading that Loretta had dropped her off, her mom.
Yes.
She had talked to Stacy, and she told Stacy about these voicemails she was getting from Dave and the phone calls. And again, she had 17 in one day from him.
Yeah, she had Mackenzie's birthday, mm-hmm. and Stacy had called Pam at home because Stacy was in, she had gotten into some trouble with drugs, and she was in kind of a rehab place.
Okay.
She called and was talking with Pam, and she could hear Dave in the background threatening to kill Pam.
Oh.
And she kept asking her mom, "Are you going to be okay, Mom? Are you going to be okay?" And Pam says, "Yeah, he's just blowing off steam. He's just packing up the rest of his stuff and leaving." And she never showed up for work the next morning.
And the one interesting part, for anyone that's listening that's not a native to South Dakota, or even the Midwest in general, here in South Dakota in December, we get extremely cold temperatures. And her jacket was left and her car keys.
Her car keys, her purse, her cigarettes, everything were sitting on the table. Her keys were on the table. The door had a deadbolt. It had to be locked from the outside. He was the only one left with a key.
So that even shows more to his guilt. And it's even ironic that the next day before the investigators released that she's missing, he showed up to confess his innocence to the police department.
Yes. And he was just talking just crazy stuff. Didn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense on why would he think that this would prove his innocence? It makes him significantly more guilty.
Yeah.
He's overall, I've never met the man, and one of my concerns always is with pursuing medical school for psychiatry. I plan to go into doing some work in the state penitentiary, and my hope is that I don't meet him, because I definitely would not be able to give him the quality care that I should give a person. But my thing for him is there's just so much anger there, that how can one person have that much power over our whole family that he feels that if he doesn't tell us, he has that control.
Because it is the last piece of control that he has. If he gives that up, he has nothing.
Right. And that's just it. He's, 70 years old now?
He's in his early 70s. I don't quite know exactly how old, but...
Just interesting. He's becoming an older man than when he was first brought into the jail. So you would hope that with time he'd want to confess, get that off his shoulders. But it sounds like he's talked to different inmates in there and has confessed, but said that we'll never know.
When he was in jail here in Watertown, his cellmate, who I know, said that Dave was talking to him and made a couple comments of, what did they think I was, stupid enough to use my own vehicle? And where Pam is, nobody's going to find her anytime soon.
Jeez.
It's like he's guilty, but he's not going to admit it.
Right. And like you said, it's that last bit of control he has over her. So looking at this case, again, Dave had a lot of what he thought is control, and the reality is that he will never let him have control over how we feel about Pam, that you all will always love her so much, and he can never take that away.
Correct.
And that's, that control, since he wants that, you ain't gonna get it.
Nope.
But to kind of finish off, is there any other thoughts that you want to add on to this?
Just kind of, it's not so much off the subject, but if anybody else out there feels trapped in a relationship, or, they're being controlled or abused or anything like that, you don't have to live like that.
Right.
Don't be a victim like Pam. Get some help. Go to somebody who can help. Or even, get a hold of me on Pam's page. I can give you some insights of how to get help.
Right.
But if we can save one person from what happened to Pam, it'll all be worth it.
Right. That was really powerful hearing that, because oftentimes people, and both men and women who've been in domestic violence situations, they do feel trapped. They feel there's no...
I was in one just recently, and I got out. And I thank God I had the strength to know what, that it was wrong.
Right.
And that I did it. It wasn't easy.
Right.
But it was the right thing to do.
It was, and you didn't see it that way at first when you were in that situation. You're like, well, I want this to work. Well, now you look back and you go, I'm safe now.
Yes.
And I'm going to be okay.
Exactly.
And that's for anyone out there that they don't believe there's other options out there. There are, and you will be okay. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not going to be right away, but it will happen. But don't be a stranger. Even if you got to reach out to Debbie or us here at the Midwest Spook-kast, we always want you all to feel safe. And there's always resources out there for you. Don't feel like you're alone, because you're not. And we don't want you to be the next Pam. We don't want you to be the next person that has an episode on Investigation Discovery, because your life is worth it. Pam's life was worth it. We would much rather have her today here versus an Investigation Discovery.
Yep.
And we hope and pray every single day that someone hears our messages, whether it was on Keloland or through Investigation Discovery or through Pam's page, or even here, that someone listens and is finally okay with opening up. But I appreciate you sharing with me today, Debbie. I know it probably wasn't easy.
Well, I love talking about Pam, keeping her memory alive, keeping people looking. So anything that I can do or anybody else can do to help find her, by all means, let's do it.
Right. And I think what you're continuing to do is showing that it's working, because if it weren't for that, we wouldn't have had them dig up the well. Because even without those answers, we know people are still listening.
Right.
There's people still wanting to know where she's at. And again, maybe that just means we're that much closer.
Exactly.
And I know in the Investigation Discovery, you talked a lot about how Christmas was her favorite holiday. I think the best Christmas present for Debbie and the rest of the family would be to bring her home and to give her that peace.
Yes, that would be.
Right.
We accepted that, she's not alive. But, to bring her home and place her with her daughter and her mother, that would be the best Christmas present any of us could have.
Definitely. Knowing that she's back safe.
Yeah.